There are a few movies in the past few years that I've looked forward to as much as The Conjuring: The Devil Made Me Do It. During the entirety of last year, I eagerly anticipated the day when my local theater would reopen, and I'd have the opportunity to watch the movie with all my friends in an after-hours screening. Unfortunately, though, I never anticipated that my theater would still be closed after all this time, so I haven't gotten to see the new one yet. Despite this, I wanted to discuss why I was so eager to watch it in the first place. So today, we're going to be looking back at the original The Conjuring and discuss why it's a modern horror classic. Obviously, there are spoilers ahead. If you are the type that cares about spoilers and haven't seen this movie or haven't in a long time, please find a copy and come back. Also, if you don't care about spoilers, maybe this video will convince you that it's worth a watch. On top of that, this movie is a horror movie and it contains imagery that some may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Back in 2013, The Conjuring wasn't the absolute juggernaut of a horror franchise that it is today. The most notable part about it was that it included James Wan, the very talented director and writer of the first Saw movie. Wan is a director who always managed to bring a unique flair to the movies that I otherwise wouldn't have much interest in. For example, he's the director of Cars 7 and Aquaman. I haven't seen the former, but among fans it seems to be a particular favorite. Aquaman, on the other hand, I have seen. And say what you will, but at least it was fun to watch and still manages to be a highlight of the DC Extended Universe. I was interested to see Wan tackle a much different kind of horror from his previous outing, so I loaded up the movie. The first and most well-known reason why this movie is so good is simply that it does a really good job of explaining itself and the rules it intends to follow. After all, this is a movie based on real-world accounts. The main characters are Ed and Lorraine Warren, a pair of paranormal investigators that actually existed in the real world. These two are the most famous in their respective job fields and have a whole heap of chilling stories, including that of the famous Annabelle doll. The doll was seemingly able to move on its own and wrote messages for its owners, leading them to believe it was possessed. They called the Warrens to conduct an investigation, and they eventually explained that the doll isn't and cannot be possessed. Through this intro story, the audience is immediately invested, but little do they know that it's all a trick. Rather than just being a cool scene, it's actually a cleverly disguised bit of exposition. People always give exposition a bad rap in movies thanks to a certain YouTube channel who doesn't understand movies, but it's actually really important. When it's delivered in a clever way, exposition is both interesting and useful. After all, how else would the audience know what's going on? The Conjuring understands this well. Rather than just throw a bunch of spooky things at you, the movie takes a much more slow and methodical approach. We start off with the doll and some basic information about demons before being introduced to our main cast of victims. They excitedly explore and play blindfolded hide-and-seek. They establish this clap rule where the people hiding have to clap at the command of the seeker in order to help them. Watching the characters blindly stumble around is a really cool way of introducing us to the layout of the house. As the movie progresses, though, we are slowly shown increasingly strange occurrences, such as bruises on the mom, the youngest claiming to have a new imaginary friend that can only be seen in this mirror, the death of the dog, this crazy bed scene, and it all comes to a head when this happens.
Hey, wanna play hide and clap?
All of this stuff is relatively grounded for a paranormal horror film, and the practical effects are used wherever possible, which gives everything a semi-realistic tone. Finally, the entire family is freaked out enough, and they call the Warrens. Their investigation reveals a possibility of demon shenanigans, so they get to work. Throughout this entire part of the movie, we're being shown how the demons operate and how the Warrens plan to combat them, all while being fed more and more world building. Lorraine senses that a witch went crazy on this property and sacrificed her kid to please Satan before hanging herself from the tree in the poster. All of this is revealed slowly, and it gives the audience time to process the information. Finally, with everything in place, the movie starts to snowball even faster. The attacks and scares get more frequent until eventually the wife goes absolutely ballistic. She begins attacking members of her own family and thrashing around, leading the Warrens to realize she's been possessed. They try carrying her outside, but that doesn't work very well.
She won't let her leave the house.
What? What do you mean?
If we take her out, the witch will kill her.
So Ed realizes he has no choice but to perform his first exorcism and go against the wishes of the church. By this point, Juan's directing is in full swing, and he's pulling out these sick upside-down shots, and this stuff starts happening. The exorcism goes a little haywire, and Lorraine steps in to really send things home. She appeals to the mother's sense of family and humanity, weakening the demon until it slowly leaves her body. Weeping, she regains control, and her body is freed. After all that insanity, the family happily reunites, and the Warrens return home triumphantly. We get a nice conclusion, and the credits roll. Upon a first watch, I thought this movie was really solid, but not quite worth the praise I currently give it. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized about it. Firstly, I just spent 2 hours watching a horror movie, and the only deaths were a dog and some birds. No one in the family dies, and no one helping the Warrens does either. In a horror climate that's almost entirely focused on death, it was really cool to see something so drastically different. I didn't feel cheated because the scares were enough to keep me interested, and the story carried its own weight. Secondly, I realized just how much effort went into every aspect of this movie. The pair playing the Warrens actually visited the real-life Warren home and studied the real-world Lorraine in order to accurately portray her on screen. They studied her and listened to the stories she told, many aspects of which appear in the final product. The whole cast is extremely solid, even with the child actors bringing something to the table. When the kids get scared, there's actually an aura of believability. A notable member of the cast is one Joey King, seen here. She gives a really good performance the entire movie, and it seems that others took notice. She is now notable for appearing in a bunch of horror classics, like Wish Upon and Slender Man, both of which are awful. Here, though, she delivers an excellent performance, partially thanks to the efforts of the crew. A lot of modern horror movies also go wrong with a crazy reliance on CGI imagery, which cheapens the experience and can often go horribly wrong. The Conjuring, however, almost entirely uses practical effects, giving everything a really nice weight. There's some awesome makeup, some really well-acted scares that leave a lot of room for imagination, and the possession scene is fantastic. Overall, this movie is probably the best of its kind. Every single aspect was carefully thought out, James Wan delivers a spark of creativity that is rarely seen in movies of this kind, and all of the little moments add up to an intense movie that builds in tension from start to finish. It starts off relatively slowly, but constantly builds the entire time before the audience suddenly finds themselves surrounded by tension. The structure of this movie honestly looks like a gnarly ramp, and thanks to Wan's directing, it does a sick flip before perfectly sticking the landing. The Conjuring's plot is a wonderful standalone story, but it also serves as a really great introduction to the franchise that would spawn from it. It's a self-contained story, but it simultaneously gives the feel of a larger narrative. It introduces us to our characters, shows us how they behave and what their goals are, and then it delivers an engaging set of trials for them to overcome. Everything wraps up nicely at the end, but there are small pieces and bits that would later be fully realized in future installments. It's extremely well done, whether or not it was intentional from the start. However, I don't want to give away everything this movie has in store, so I've left out a couple surprises and avoided fully explaining the plot. That being said, I'm going to wrap it up here. The Conjuring is a great movie, one of my personal favorites and a modern classic. I also love the second one for the record, and in the future I may cover both 2 and 3 at the same time. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, let me know in the comments or by liking. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and feel free to share the video around. If you made it this far, tell me your favorite toy when you were a kid, and I'll heart your comment. Until next time.